Welcome to another edition of the MoRo Talk Show, and I am here with President-elect Sue Rich. How are you today, Sue?
You know, I'm great. Thank you.
Good. All right, we're going to jump right into it as we always do. Sue, how long have you been in Rotary, and who is your sponsor?
I started in Rotary in the year 2014, so if the math is right, that's about 7 years ago. And my sponsor was Judy Piscatello.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and Judy was somebody that I worked with at the county office. And one day she came into my office and plopped herself down and said, "Hey, I think you should join Rotary." And I said, "Oh, well, let me see what that's all about."
Great. So you went as a guest.
Right.
Decided you liked it.
Right.
And here you are, President-elect.
Here I am. It's a scary, scary thing.
It's a scary thing. It's like a Venus flytrap.
Exactly. Like, what happened?
So when you get in the presidential line, you always are concerned about membership, or at least I am. And we talk about what makes members want to stay. So I'm going to ask you, what made you want to stay? What was your Rotary moment?
Okay. So I will confess to you, Father Ryan.
Please no.
Yeah. I will confess to you that I joined Rotary for the wrong reasons.
Well, okay.
Okay, so let me start there. When I worked at the county office for many, many years, and my job for a long time was in the curriculum and instruction division, which meant I was doing business all the time with teachers, instructional aides, and administrators. And I knew that world really well. I felt like I was connected with everybody in the districts, but not necessarily in the larger community. And I had a colleague in the office, and her name was Jane Johnston. And Jane sat in the Administrative Services Division, and she was a member of Rotary. And I was vaguely aware from time to time that she was going off to Rotary meetings, and she was involved, and that Rotary was important in her life. And then, very tragically, she passed away. And over a series of a couple of months, the superintendent decided that he was going to ask me to take her spot. And I remember saying to him, do I have to join Rotary? Because she had been a member. And that sounds so bad, I know. But he said, no, you don't. And so I didn't. I didn't for probably the first 6 months, maybe even 12 months I was in that position. And by the time Judy Piscatello came to visit me, I had realized that although I was pretty well connected in the educational community, I was not well connected in the larger community, the business community, the community that involved all the nonprofits. So it came to me that it would be a really good thing for the office. So it was something I was doing for the office. But to your question, the reason that I've stayed is it feeds me. And one of the ways that it feeds me is the series of speakers who come in. And I just am so thankful for the opportunity to hear from people who are in a wide spectrum of professions, who are real contributors in the community, and I learn. And so I feel obliged to be a lifelong learner as an educator, but I just really have enjoyed the speakers. And secondarily, you forge relationships with people, and those relationships are very meaningfully built over time, especially as you're working together. I think MoRo is blessed with a lot of committees. So I found committees where I felt like my interests and maybe some of my gifts could be applied. And I just found that I really enjoyed working with fellow Rotarians on a variety of service projects. And so I've stayed because of the relationships. I've stayed for selfish reasons because I've learned a lot, and I've come to know my own community a lot better. And it's truly a highlight of the week to come into a Rotary meeting, either by Zoom or preferably in person. So that's why I stay.
Great.
And you know, I have a commute, President Ryan.
You
Yeah,
do,
I do.
yeah,
So,
from Oakdale.
Exactly. So for me to get here, it's a commitment of probably 35, 40 minutes each way. So you know it's worth it if you're making the drive, especially with the price of gas.
Right.
Right.
Has anyone talked to you about the Rotary Chopper yet?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll talk.
I'd like to hear about that.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's fine that you joined for networking, and we, you know, when I first joined, I joined for networking. Like, hey, what's going on in this community? And it was like I was taken to a coffee, and it was beaten out of me. like, don't join this for business and don't join this for networking, and you should join for the right reasons. And I was like, okay. But the number one reason people join in the United States is networking, and that's okay. I don't think we should hide from that. And, get them in the door, and then once they're, soaking in Rotary,
Yeah.
then it's like, hey, you want to change the world, you want to go on these trips, you want to help with service projects and all those things. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that.
It's really powerful to realize that you're a part of something that's incredibly large, that it's global, and there are so many fellow Rotarians all over the world doing incredible things. There's a sense of pride that comes from that.
So when you got the call to be president-elect, what went through your mind?
Well, Ryan, they called more than one time. The first 2 times I declined. And I said to them, the wonderful people who asked, I said, I know I cannot do justice to this while I'm working. And when I was at the county office, I pretty much left the house at 6:15 in the morning and came back about 6:30 at night. It's pretty full days for me, and in watching the president, from the audience, I thought, I just really can't do this job well if I'm working. So I did say, I really can't do it as long as I'm working. Well, the minute I retired, and it's very flattering. It's extremely flattering. So the first thought really that came to mind was, yes, I can do this, but I am so afraid of that moment that's going to happen when someone steps up to the microphone and I look at that person and I know that person, and for the life of me, I can't remember that person's name. So that was my immediate fear, but because of the work that I'd done at the county office for all those many years, I've stood in front of audiences quite a bit, so I don't have that fear of public speaking that I think a lot of people might bring up as a reason they wouldn't want to do it. So that wasn't part of it. It's just I'm afraid of offending somebody that I know by not remembering their name on the spot. But it was an honor to be asked, and I take this next year very seriously in terms of doing the best that I can do for the club and the members. And so there's that kind of nerve-wracking part about don't miss something that might cause a misstep somewhere else. So, flattered and scared is probably the bottom line.
And that's good. I think I had the same thing, and it's good to have that good mix, because if you are scared, you just want to prepare even more, at least I did. And I've missed people's names maybe a couple times. I think I've covered it once well, and then once the gal said, my name is, I'm like, okay. But it's just going to happen, so.
Yeah.
And it's just something that happens. But it's a lot of work, which but it is rewarding. And that's what I try to tell people who say, oh gosh, this is a lot of work. And it is, but it's 90% very rewarding. So it's worth it. It's like a labor of love. So
It's been surprising to me that several past presidents have come up to me and said, you know what? The year that I was the president is probably one of the best years of my life. And that kind of took me aback a little bit, because I thought it is a labor, underscore labor of love. And yet it seems that there's a lot of reward that comes back to. At least that's the story on the street.
Mm-hmm. And the past presidents are great because they are rooting for you. They've been in that spot. They know what it's like. They know the challenges that come up out of left field, and they are really rooting for you. So it's a good feeling to know that they are, and it's just a good overall sense, like, hey, there's so many people in that audience that want me to do well. So.
Well, I'm going to throw you into that camp, too, because
absolutely.
You've been very generous with me this year getting ready, and I know that our monthly meetings have been very helpful to me just to have a sense about what I should be thinking about, what I need to start working on. So let me thank you publicly for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
And your time is much appreciated.
Yeah, sure. And it's, I want you to do well, and I want to give you as much information as I can to do well. So, yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. In your journey as president-elect, what has surprised you the most?
I think probably the scope and the depth and the layering that Rotary, big Rotary, capital R Rotary has. So when you are in the queue, so to speak, to become the president, there are some invitations that are extended to you and some expectations too, to attend professional development to help you get ready. And in my year, because of COVID, that was primarily over Zoom. But then you start to figure out that there are clubs, and then there are areas, and then there are districts. And then there's this huge building with many, many stories that's all dedicated to Rotary. And you start to find yourself in the company of president-elects from all over the place. I know for the PETS, which is the President-elect Training, and I'm guessing the S is seminar or something like that.
I think so, yeah.
Symposium with something,
Right.
something S. You know, and you're sitting there with people from Hawaii and Colorado and Texas. I mean, it's just amazing when you realize the larger network that you're a part of. And the incredible number of resources that you can tap into if only you had enough time. Online, virtual meetings, in-person meetings. I think that has been the biggest surprise for me.
Right, and then there's pets.
Yes.
Then there's pre-pets.
Yes.
Then there's pre-pets.
Can we talk about post-pets?
Sure, there's post-pets, and yeah, that's a little overwhelming when you do all those things. It's like, okay, how many things around pets are there? But it, you know, it's all, you're going to glean information from all of those, and it does stink that they're virtual because it is for you. I got out of pets, and like a week later they shut everything down. So we were like one of the last pets classes that happened. But it's still, you know, it's still a way to connect with these president-elects, and they're in the same boat as you are, and they really want to do well for their club. And I've used that network this year to connect and ask questions. And hey, are you doing this? Is this coming up in your club? And so it's been helpful.
Well, and I think it also allows you to put your club in perspective compared to other clubs. The number of times I've heard this quote, that MoRo has more committees than a lot of clubs have members. You know, I would be a rich woman if someone gave me money every time I heard that. But also when you realize that most of these clubs are operating without any office staff. And you think, oh, thank you, you know, that we have such a deep membership that so many hands make light work. But also that office staff I know is absolutely invaluable. So I'm very thankful.
When you are president-elect, you join the board, and without giving anything away that might be confidential, what has surprised you the most about being on the board?
I think that there is a careful vetting of potential new members to Rotary, and that was a little bit of a surprise to me. You know, when you're sitting in the general audience, and there's an all call during membership drives to, you know, bring people into the club, just ask. I guess I didn't hear or didn't remember the notion that invite people in that you think would make good Rotarians, and particularly those that would, you know, adhere to the four-way test. Someone who would come in with an intent to serve the community, to make the community a better place. So that was probably the biggest surprise for me, was that there was discussion around the applications and the people, and it wasn't just a slam dunk for people to become members of Rotary.
Interesting, and yeah, that's true. And sometimes when
I totally choked just now.
my cameraman is laughing, because he choked, not because of what I said. That's all right. It's true. And so when you are then president, you're up at the podium, and people are bringing guests, and they're like, oh, they turned in their paperwork, just a matter of time. And it's like, maybe not. Right? And I mean, definitely err on the side of getting as many people in as we can. But there is a consideration, which I think should happen. But it's a fine line to walk, because you don't want to be exclusive. You want to be very broad-based and welcome as many people in as you can from all different walks of life. And So it's a fine line to walk, but I'm glad that the board does that.
Well, and in absolute candor also, the sort of scrutiny that people undergo has everything to do with intent and character. I think it's important to acknowledge that Rotary is extremely interested in being as diverse as possible. So the discussions are never around, backgrounds or any of that sort of thing. It has just to do with if a person has been in business for any length of time, have they been a reputable and honest business person? That sort of thing.
Right. What are you right now? What are you spending the most time on?
Well, right now it's important to make sure that we have chairs and or co-chairs for all of the committees. So right now I'm working on reaching out to people for just the couple of committees that we have left that are without a chairperson or co-chairs. So I'm thinking about that. I'm also gearing up with a lot of conversations behind the scenes with Kathy for some of the things that she would like to know to get prepared for the years. Simple things like, what school is going to be the recipient of the books? What kind of books do you want? Well, to ask a former English teacher what kind of books you want opens up a whole can of worms, right? So my daughter, who is a brand spanking new librarian, got an email from me about, hey, what's out there? I've already got this school. It's a school where I did some tutoring. It's a school where my husband served as a teacher for a short time in a pretty tough neighborhood in Modesto. And so I want to make sure that the books that go into the library there are going to be used by the kids. So it has to be books of diversity, probably some books that are going to be pretty easy for English language learners to access. But books that maybe aren't the classics that I know and love, although we will have some of the classics that I know and love, because a library has to have a copy of Madeline and Make Way for Ducklings. We all know that. But so some of that is preparing behind the scenes with Kathy. I'm praying a lot. I actually am already starting to put together some little slideshows of things that I want to share. A really good friend of mine gave me a book, and I'm going to tear it all apart to introduce it in parts over the course of the year. So I'm really starting to think about the unique pieces that I might bring to a meeting. So much of the meeting agendas are pretty much set in terms of the business that needs to take place, and then of course making sure there's plenty of time for the guest speakers. So, but it's the around the edges stuff that I'm working on.
Good, and that's great because that's where you're going to put your personality on the club. And me as just a Rotarian, I always liked that. And so I joined when Ross Lee was president, and I knew Lynn was my sponsor, and she came after him, and I was just like, oh, how's this going to work? And it was different fields of the club. And then with Pete Herman, it was a much different feel. And so it's been great to have that, because I think that is another thing that keeps our club going moving forward, right? Are the presidents that put their personality on it. And yeah, it's definitely a good thing. So please do that. And I'm glad you're doing it.
And is this the part where I tell you you're an awfully hard act to follow?
No.
It's like, oh, I didn't choose very well.
No, I'm not fishing for compliments.
Well, no, but it's only the truth. So
Well,
you've done a great job.
Thank you very much. And it's going to be great. You're going to be great. And, you are funny. You are great. You're very quick-witted. And it's going to be great. And it's been, as we've been members, it's great to have a new president come in. And you get, oh, what are they about? And yeah, sure, it's a different energy, but that's good.
Well, I think the timing for your presidency was excellent with all of the requirements of videotaping and Zooming and then the hybrid complexity. So the timing of your presidency couldn't have been better in terms of the skill set you brought to the role. I know you're not looking for compliments, but you've done a great job. So thank you for that.
Well,
it's been fun to be in the audience.
Thank you. We talk about praying, and I think, I'm going to go there. God had something to do with that.
Yeah.
That I was president in that year. Or, David Boring and I talked about how would Phil know to get that bigger screen when we really needed a bigger screen. And, I think there's a providential hand in that somewhere. So it's been interesting to do and see. Yeah, I appreciate you talking about being approached to be president. And at the time you said, hey, I'm really busy with work. I can't do it. You got a long commute to Oakdale every day. And something that came up when David Boring and I were talking is I know they've approached people that are younger and they have kids. And they're saying, gosh, I just with the kids and all their stuff, like I can't because it's too much time. And I understand that. However, I would like to see some of those people be president with kids because I think it brings a new dynamic, as we've been talking about, to the meetings then. Not that they have to bring their kids to the meetings, but I think it brings a new perspective, let's say. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I think like membership in the club, diversity in the leadership is always a good thing. And I think that in order to be attractive to younger potential members, having a young, same point in life president would certainly make the club more welcoming or maybe seem more doable to a young person. So as you suggested earlier, when you get involved with these pets and pre-pets and those sorts of things, one of the things they talk to you about is trying to think outside of the box. And one of the ideas that came forward when I was participating was the idea of co-presidency, where you actually might want to consider having more than one. So to ease the burden for someone who felt like at this time in my life, I just really can't do it. I can see the complications there. Would you every other meeting or would you divide duties up differently? It would be an interesting thing to entertain. But that's a possibility that might be worth considering in order to make that possible, or at least possible in somebody's mind who, was younger, maybe starting out in a business or starting a family. It's a possibility, but I raise the possibility with a little bit of concern because I see that it's not an easy fix.
I like that. I remember hearing that, and I just assumed, which is always trouble, that, gosh, that's for a club that they don't have a lot to draw from. Somebody wants to be, they need somebody to be president that's done it before. They don't really want to do it as much. So how do we, get a co-president in there? Maybe you're really trying to pull somebody along. But you took what they're saying about thinking outside of the box to heart, and that is more of a way to look at it for our club. If you could have a younger person who maybe doesn't have the time and put them together with somebody who does. So very interesting.
Well, I know a lot of teachers, they call it job sharing, where they'll take a contract and they'll split it so that they can spend time at home with young kids but still keep their hand in the game, so to speak, in the classroom, stay connected. Of course, the secret to all that is making sure that the person that you're sharing with is somebody that you are on the same page with. But, it's a consideration, possibly.
Interesting, and you've seen it work in the teaching world.
Absolutely.
Neat.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, maybe we'll have to, maybe you'll have to bring that to the board. Those days for me are done. One thing that I did not send to you beforehand, it's not a gotcha question, but I know literacy is very important to you. Tell me more about that. Why is that important to you?
Well, I always laughingly refer to myself as a recovering high school teacher, recovering high school English teacher. So I began my teaching career at Riverbank High School, and I grew up in the Bay Area and was attending a high school myself that was pretty much everyone was going to trot off to college afterwards. And it was a little bit of a culture shock when I came to the Central Valley, and I realized, looking at these high school students, that they just were not nearly as literate as I would hope they would be in order to also have those options to go off to college. And I remember I had a class, in my first year teaching, I had a class of juniors, so we're talking 16, 17-year-old kiddos, and I said, okay, we're going to write an essay. And this kid took a piece of paper and wrote S-A, and I thought, we're in deep trouble here.
Right, wow.
So my whole career, and I had 13 years in the classroom, my whole teaching career was really trying to catch kids up and teach them skills that would give them some true options when they were finished with high school. So when I was it was at the end of my 13th year, I took a leave of absence for the classroom for family reasons, and it coincided with the time that my daughter started kindergarten. So I offered myself up as a classroom mom, to come in once a week, and I was there the very first week of kindergarten, and I looked at these kids, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks that on the very first day of kindergarten, some of these kids were already behind. And kids are smart. I mean, they figure out right away, well, they're getting it, I'm not getting it, I must be stupid. And they put themselves, they paint a picture of themselves which doesn't really allow for scholarly success. So it became very apparent to me that even though I was working with kids at the end of the K-12 system, that bringing kids into the school system better prepared would really give them a leg up. So probably 8 years ago now, I was working at the county office, and the then librarian, the county librarian, brought us an opportunity to join a grade level reading community. And the grade level reading community is national. There are hundreds of communities, some of them cities, some of them counties, and they all strive to bring kids up to reading at grade level by the end of third grade. And so we jumped in. And the lovely thing about that attempt at community impact was they told us from the get-go, work on three things. Work on attendance, get the kids to school. I always laughingly called that derriere and chair.
The French term, yes.
The French term, yes. You can't learn if you're not there. And the second one had to do with the summer slide. Particularly kids of poverty end up losing ground over the summer because they're not going to museums, they're not taking trips, and they're not reading. But the other one was kindergarten readiness, bringing kids into school kindergarten ready. And we found the Imagination Library. And the Imagination Library is something that Dolly Parton started. And she intended when she started out just to serve her little county in Tennessee where she grew up. And it is now international. But it's an opportunity to register children into a database anywhere from birth to their 5th birthday, and they receive a book once a month, U.S. mailed to the home. And what's really key about that is it's addressed to the kid. So when it arrives, there's this sense of ownership. And we started out just activating the zip codes around neighborhoods for 8 pilot schools in 8 different districts. We were able to collect some excellent data because all of our kindergarten teachers gave the same readiness assessment, and we could track whether or not it made a difference. And we discovered that the longer kids were in the Imagination Library, the more of an impact it had. So with the blessing of the new county superintendent and with a lot of wonderful volunteers, we've activated every zip code in the county. And we have, I think I told you, 1,100 kiddos currently enrolled with hundreds and hundreds of kids who've already graduated. So that's my new passion.
That's great.
Yeah, it's really exciting for me. Every time I put kids in, it's like a little bit of a rush. And when I get twins, it's really fun.
A lot to unpack there in a good way. That's interesting that you are, when you were observing kids in kindergarten, they were putting themselves in these little boxes that then are hard to get out of.
Yeah.
And, we always hear about, well, the teacher's like, here's the slow readers and what have you. And that's one thing, right, that we should fight in a certain way to overcome. But when the kids themselves are doing it, that's interesting and not in a good way.
Yeah.
And I love the derrieres and chairs, isn't life more just about showing up?
Exactly.
Right. But, so if they're not getting that support at home, they're going to get it in the classroom. But they're not going to get it if they're not there. So get them in there. And I just, reading was so important to me. Like I liked it. I was an introvert. I wasn't great at sports. I wasn't, we could do a lot of those things. But for me, it was an escape. Like, how do I get How do I get out of my little town, Wisconsin? Oh, I can do it through a book. You know, and I think if kids, that's why I picked the Hardy Boy books, because they were a way for me to have an adventure, you know? And then there's like, gosh, there's 90 more adventures behind that. Just gonna have to go to the library and pick one up. And I think if kids, I don't mind if kids are reading for entertainment, because that's going to get them, I think, overall hooked on reading. So, but, you know, Dolly Parton's amazing. People, I think they're kind of getting it now, but she does a lot of great, great things, like this Imagination Library.
Yep.
And I am grateful that you've done the work you've done locally, and now, gosh, every zip code in the county is doing it, and it's just a neat program, and it makes the kids feel special.
Yes. You know, it's been interesting. I made mention of the fact that the books come addressed to the children. And so there's this sense of ownership. And we did a couple of parent surveys, and we have some anecdotal information. And one of the parents said, my kid drags me out to the mailbox every day. And if when we open up the mailbox, a book is in there, we have to sit down on the curb to read it. We can't even make it back into the house. And there was one little girl, I was sent a photograph from the school secretary. This little girl would come to school every day because her older sibling was a student there, and mom was walking the kid into the front office and getting her to her classroom. And here would come this little toddler behind her, gripping her books. She was holding on to her books for dear life, and they were hers. And if people came to her house, she demanded that they read them to her, because these were her books. So there's some really great stories, and some of our families where mom and dad don't speak a lot of English, the older brothers and sisters are frequently the readers, and it becomes a family event. We have a couple of parent surveys that came back to us in Spanish, and they were saying, you know, we're all learning. We're all learning at the table. And of course, some of the early books that are in the queue for these kids to get, the library has 60 titles. And the titles are chosen by early literacy experts to be developmentally appropriate for the age of the child, just about down to the month. So if there are 2 or 3 children in the household that are all in the Imagination Library, they're getting different books depending on their age. But some of those books are teaching colors, and they're teaching animals, and they're teaching shapes, and they're teaching early counting. So you've got whole families sometimes who are really benefiting from the books that these kids are getting, and they're picking up English and learning important concepts too. And the older brothers and sisters who are doing the reading are getting their own reading skills reinforced too. So it's a good thing all the way around.
Excellent. Now, in your Rotary year as president, are we going to hear more about it?
Oh, yes, you are.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad, because
Yeah.
I think it's powerful.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I was involved in the campaign for the library, it was about, you know, getting these kids to read.
Yeah.
And that will, what is it, 3rd grade?
3rd grade
Yeah,
is the mile.
they're
Yeah.
learning to read to 3rd grade, and then 3rd grade on, they use reading for learning.
Correct.
Yeah. But the stats on kids that don't know how to read, their life is, for lack of a better word, crap.
Yeah.
So if we can change that, which you are, powerful, powerful stuff.
The literacy rates for incarcerated people are horrendously low. And you know, you think about it now, the old blue-collar, hands-on kind of jobs that used to be available to people who maybe didn't read very well or didn't know the basic concepts of mathematics. Those jobs don't exist anymore. And especially with the infusion of technology, some of the manuals that people have to be able to read to work on machinery is written at a higher grade level than some college texts. So reading is becoming more and more important, not less. That adage about, you know, up to 3rd grade kids are learning to read and then they're reading to learn always makes me cringe just a tad, because there's still more skills to be taught in reading. But if you don't have those fundamentals down, you know, you're falling behind in science, and now you're falling behind in history, because you're expected to get information through your reading. And even though textbooks maybe now are available on some sort of a handheld device, you still have to be able to read to access them.
Sue, is there anything that you want to talk about that I have not brought up?
I guess I would like to really reiterate that Rotary has so many opportunities and options within it that there's a place for just about everybody. I know that I love that Rotary has an invocation, so that there's this underlining awareness that, yeah, you know, we have a spiritual side to us that we need to acknowledge. And I really appreciate that everyone is very service-minded, which that having that servant's heart is certainly, you know, a part of most people's faith walks. I just wanted to say I think that it's an incredible and deep opportunity beyond what maybe people don't understand when they haven't been a member. And I keep hearing it for all of those membership drives. Just ask. Just ask somebody to come. And it's really the truth. It's how I got in the building. And I'm really glad. My husband looks at me sometimes and he says, "Why are you driving all the way to Modesto?"
Aren't you supposed to be retired?
Are you supposed to be retired? But it's just so worth it and so satisfying. So.
And you're right. People can bring their passion into Rotary. You know, if it's a more of like, hey, literacy, great. That's going to dovetail into right. Rotary's all about, right? But even if it's, I like to knit, I like to play soccer, I like to watch this specific kind of film. Great, bring it in, form a club. Every Saturday morning, we're going to get together and watch art films from France. And if you want to join us, join us.
Yeah.
You know, but you can bring all of those things with you to Rotary. There's a place for it.
And it's wonderful to be networked with people from so many different avenues and experiences, and you know, to know that people have hobbies too that are really interesting. To know that Brad Hahn is this incredible artist on the side. Those sorts of things are wonderful too.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Well, President-elect Sue, P.E. Sue, as I like to call you, which I don't think you like, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome, and I know the club look forward to your presidency.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
You got it.
Okay.